Hi, my name is Dominic, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about Benson Lee's Soul Searching. So the movie Soul Searching takes place in the 80s in Korea, and it's focused around a group of students who travel from around the world to Korea to learn about the culture, the language, and essentially what it's like to be a Korean. And the idea behind this comes from after the Korean War. Korea was almost completely destroyed, and a lot of families could no longer take care of themselves. So they would either, send off their children for adoption in hopes that they would get picked up by better families in foreign countries, or they would just completely uproot their family and go move somewhere else in hopes that, they can give their children and themselves a better opportunity in the future. So in the 80s, the Korean government made a program which essentially brought over these foreign Koreans, and over the summer they would try and educate them. So the story focuses around a small group, about 10 students, and how they spend their summer in Korea. Even before I went to go and see this movie, a lot of people were talking about it and how the music was really, really good. And even, just standing in front of the cinema waiting to get in, people were talking about, oh, the best part about this movie is definitely the music. And I just thought I would address that and say, yeah, actually, the soundtrack is amazing. The soundtrack, together with a few other things such as set design and the costume design, really helped to put this idea through that this is the 80s, and it wasn't just filmed this year. I mean, it gives this genuine feel, and I really, really appreciate that. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I feel like this movie's really good. Some of the things the directors did well, some of the things the actors did well, and try to give you my reasons for why you should go and see this movie. Number one on my list is definitely the characters themselves. There's actually quite a few characters. I think I said around 10 or so, but what ends up happening is that the movie focuses around 6, and then within those 6 characters, there's 3 main protagonists in the form of 3 male leads. And I think that the decision to focus on the small core group was really, really smart. It doesn't dilute the story in any way, and it sort of strengthens the idea that we get to follow these characters on their journey as they transition from who they were before the trip and then who they are when they leave Korea again. So the 3 male leads are Sergio, Sid, and Klaus. Now, Sergio is sort of the clown, the comedic relief of the movie. He's the Mexican Korean, and for the most part of the movie, he's there to sort of lighten the mood. He has a lot of funny one-liners. His character is just all around a funny and laid-back and relaxed character. But in some scenes, he can also be quite serious, and you get to see another side of him. And I really like the fact that we don't have these one-dimensional characters. Each characters, at least the 6 main characters, you get an in-depth feel of who they are and why they are the way they are. And Sergio is just one example of that. The next character is Klaus. He's the German Korean, and he's very calm, he's very collected, he's very laid back, and he's also very safe. He doesn't take a lot of risks, he's not all too adventurous, but this changes through the course of the movie. And this is just another way we get to see the growth of a character. And the third and final main male lead is Sid, and Sid is the rebel of the group. He's got the punk style, he's got the badass sort of vibe about him. He really doesn't care what anybody else thinks about him, and he just does pretty much what he wants to do whenever he wants to do. So yeah, essentially these 3 main characters, they change over the course of the movie, and that links in with how there's one main plotline that the story follows, but then each character sort of branches off from the main plot. Now, the female counterparts to the males are just as important. There's again 3 very distinct, very individual characters, and the first is Grace. Grace is most relatable to Sid in that she's sort of this rebellious character. Often in the movie, they call her Madonna. She's got this, the style of Madonna, the sense of Madonna. She even sings her song. So she starts off being very self-centric, very egotistical. She doesn't care about others. She thinks she's in charge. She's better than everyone else. But again, as the movie progresses, as she gets to know Sid, as she gets to know Klaus, as she gets to know the other characters, she develops a more human side, I guess. She becomes kinder. She cares about others. And eventually she gets together with Sid. This is also another thing that happens between the 6 main characters, the 3 males and the 3 females. At the end of the movie, they pair up. The second female is Soo Jin, I think her name is. Soo Jin is the most independent of the 3. She's also the most tomboyish. She's very determined in her individuality, I guess you could say. She likes to stick up for herself. She's also the only member of the group who does a martial art. She's very well trained. She's I believe first dan black belt in Taekwondo, and she uses this as like a sort of a defense mechanism. Third and final is Chris. Chris is the only member of the group who is adopted. She was adopted into an American family, and she's lost almost all of her sense of being Korean. She can't speak the language. She can't write the language. She's forgotten her Korean, like her original Korean name. And so she is almost completely the opposite of Klaus, which is interesting because in the end, those 2 pair up. So Klaus and Chris pair up, Grace and Sid pair up, and Soo Jin and Sergio pair up. Now I mentioned how there's like one main plot line throughout the movie, and how each individual character branches off. And I sort of want to talk about that now. My favorite break-off storyline is definitely between Klaus and Chris. So Chris, like I said, is adopted, and she doesn't know who her birth mother is. But being able to come to Korea, she makes it her goal to find her birth mother, and to introduce herself to her actual family. And Klaus offers to help her. He's almost fluent in Korean. He is by far the most Korean of the group. They go to a, I guess you could call it like a registration office. They have all the documents on the children that were sent away, and they manage to find her mother, and they set up a meeting with her. It's a great scene when they first meet. They meet in a restaurant, and this is one of the only scenes in the movie that does not have subtitles, and I think that's really, really powerful. It puts the audience in Chris's shoes. You, as the audience, unless you speak Korean, I mean I don't speak Korean, and most of the people that I went to see the movie with, they did not speak Korean. So what it does is it puts you in this situation where you don't really know what's going on. You only know so much because Klaus is there to translate. He actually does not translate everything that's going on, and you're sort of left with a sense of like you don't fully comprehend, you don't fully understand what's going on, and I think that's really, really powerful. It's a great choice by Lee to put that into the movie, and it's one of the few scenes that are quite serious. I mentioned how Sergio is like the comedy aspect of the movie. The movie as a whole is I guess you could call it a drama, but there's a lot of comedy in it, and surprisingly, before watching the movie, I didn't know how serious this was gonna get. I didn't know that there was gonna be some deep themes, and I was really taken aback when there was a couple of scenes where I honestly just teared up a little bit. I just did not see it coming, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. So the second branch off comes in the form of sort of like a love triangle, I guess you could describe it. It's between a character named Mike, who is this sort of very stereotypical macho military guy, and then you have Sid, and then you have Grace. Now, Grace is actually quite a fragile character. she doesn't like to show it, but she's actually quite sort of in a sad situation. She resorts a lot to alcohol and drinking, and a few times in the movie, Sid has to save her from herself, essentially. When she gets drunk, he carries her back to her room, he takes away all the drinks from her room, and in another scene together with Mike, I won't say exactly what it is, but in another scene with Mike, he again saves her, and through this constant, progression of their relationship, she changes her ways. She becomes a lot nicer towards other people. She doesn't take out her anger on others, and the chemistry and the relationship between Sid and Grace develops until they're a couple by the end of the movie. This is not as interesting as the other secondary branch off story, but it is one of the other ones. And the third one is between Sergio and Soo-jin. As I mentioned, Soo-jin does Taekwondo, and she's very confident in her power, and she likes to be in control. And then you have Sergio, who's sort of this fun-loving guy, but at his core, he wants to be manly. He's got this sort of macho attitude, and he likes to show off sometimes. And it's during one of these scenes where he tries to show off, where things go wrong. He's in the Taekwondo class together with Soo-jin, and Soo-jin has become sort of the secondary teacher because of her vast knowledge, and she asks for a volunteer. So Sergio goes up, and unfortunate for both of them, he somehow manages to kick Soo-jin in the face and give her a bloody nose. So she runs off crying, and he follows after her. And what follows is a scene where they open up to each other. She talks about her father and her mother and how she struggled as a child because of her violent upbringing. And surprisingly, to both her and to the audience, Sergio had lived through something very similar. And so they now have something to connect to, something to relate to each other to. And it's like the spark which starts their relationship. So I've talked a little bit about the characters and how I feel like it's definitely the strongest part. I really, really enjoy how fully developed they are. They're not one-dimensional. They have relationships connected to almost every other character, and by the end of the movie, it's a really satisfying ending. You get a sense of completion, a sense of a happy ending. Now, I'm not saying that every movie has to have a happy ending, but for the sake of this film, it really, really worked out in the favor of the movie and of the story. It gives the audience a clear-cut ending, and you feel like you've learned something. You feel like the characters have accomplished something, and you feel like you've come on this journey with them, and you've come to an end, and you can feel satisfied with the ending.